Newfoundland Hobbyist is sponsored by paulsfinest.com, Mid-Island Motorsports located in Springdale, wildmedkits.ca, and Robinson's General Store located in Middle Arm. Hey, you're watching the Newfoundland Hobbyist. Thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate having you here. We have a very special project today. Have a look at my new rifle. It's actually not my new rifle, it's the rifle that my wife and I gave my little daughter for Christmas. She's only 3 years old, and this is her first rifle. It's a little Savage Arms 22. It handles 22 LR rounds, and it's a very beautiful little bolt action. Super cute, very tiny. I didn't intend to go with the pink because I don't necessarily like sticking with everything pink just because she's a girl, but when I got there and I seen that beautiful bright pink, I couldn't resist. So it was pink over the other choices there, the orange and the blue and stuff. The pink just looked really nice. The Savage Arms sticker still on there, but she is very excited and she really enjoyed firing some shots out of this rifle over the Christmas holidays. She just really liked it, and that was exciting for me. So one thing I did when she fired her first shots, I kept the casings of the 22 rounds, and one of these casings here I marked. I picked it up. It was her very first casing ever fired from her first rifle ever, which is very special, very exciting. Now I figured since she has her own little rifle and this will grow with her and she will learn to shoot with this and probably grow on from it, which is a very exciting thought. But since she has her own rifle, I think it's time for her to have her own fixed blade knife. Being that Dad is a knife maker, I think it's time. She's 3, I think it's time that she have her own little knife and she start using and learning those skills. These casings that I mentioned, I kept them because I didn't intend on keeping the casings. When we ejected the casing and we both held the bolt together and opened the rifle and the casing popped out, I looked down and I saw it on the ground and I said, that's special, that belongs in something. I know I can incorporate that into something, and I think a knife handle is the perfect thing. So we're going to attempt to do that. We're going to make her first knife. So here's what I have drawn up for my girl. We have roughly 6 inches overall length. That is 2.5 inches in the blade, 3.5 inches in the handle. The 2.5 inches in the blade should be plenty of big to handle any task and even grow with her. Most pocket knives we have, like if I'm carrying one in my pocket right here now, the Spyderco Delica has a 2.5 inch to 3 inch or so blade length. That's pretty common. So she'll be able to use that even as she grows. 7/8 to 3/16 deep at the deepest part here of the belly of the knife. 3.5 inches of handle, but very slim profile. So you notice I'm really cut in shallow here. This is only maybe 3/8 at this point. Very slim handle for a small hand. And we'll keep that slim in width as well in scale thickness. 3.5 inches gives enough handle real estate that'll grow with her, and she'll have a lot as she gets older. But notice here, really nice deep choil. That's why I could have went with a slimmer blade, something like this, but I want a nice deep choil here so her hand is locked in behind the blade. Someone that's young or small and learning, They might not be as confident to grip their knife. You don't want to, let's say if the choil was like this, very mild, you don't want a hand slipping up over that edge. Also, we're not running the edge off the back. We've got a nice little sharpening choil, just a bit of a ricasso back here. That is our blade. I'll see what grind we end up with when I start working the steel. I'm thinking high flat is what's going to look best right now and be best for her using. We'll see. I did a little bit of decorative, just picturing what we're going to do here, but that's apt to change as well. Now we've got to throw it on some steel. Just looking at the pattern here, thinking we need a name for it. That rifle is called the Rascal. That's the model from Savage. I think Rascal would be a pretty cute name for this little knife. What do you think? New pattern. Rascal. So now that we have our basic shape cut out here, now it's time for the grinding. Now it's when the knife actually starts to look like a knife. So we'll grind our bevels in right now. We'll perimeter ground it. Any extra flare grinds or anything just for decoration, we'll put that in. I'm thinking a swedge, maybe like a compound grind swedge or something real special like that. We'll see how I feel when I dig in, but this is the part that's difficult to bring you guys along for. All the gear, the grinding, doesn't work well for the camera in this small space. There's not a lot of room to film. We'll see what we can do. Have to mark my work. Newfoundland Hobbyist is sponsored by EdgeProInc.com, ABS Bussing in Middle Arm, By the Sea Inn and Cafe located in Kings Point, and Noble's Timber Mart with locations in Springdale and Bay Verte. So now our knife is heat treated. As you can see here, I also heat treated a batch of a model that I call the Prevail, which is a much more substantial knife, as you can see. But now we have to clean these up because they're covered in scale, soot, and an outer material called martensite that forms when the surface of the material decarbonizes, and it's really, really hard scale is what it is. And we'll remove that with a wire wheel on the bench grinder. And then we'll see. I was thinking about leaving this forged finish complete black blade, but I may consider re-grinding in a satin grind on those bevels. I think it'll look super sharp, really pretty for this combo. Now you can see we're getting somewhere. Forged finish left on the flats, which is nice because of this compound grind here. It's ground to a satin finish, and then I gave it a light buff on the buffing wheel. That sort of got a little bit of a sheen to it, and then that makes that dark forged finish really look really sharp there. The lines are really crisp. So I actually just had this piece arrive just for this project, a special piece. It's the first time with me working with this. Have a look at that. This is wood, stabilized box elder burl in extreme pink. So this is an exotic wood, very unique burl wood as it is, but then it's been dyed to what's called extreme pink. And let me tell you, this stabilized wood will polish up like glass when it's done. I can't wait. There now, like the blanks are just rough ground to dimension, rough dimension, so you don't get to appreciate the material at all. You wait till we grind this in. First we have to split it down and see which dimensions we're going to take for the knife. Just sizing the piece up here. Whenever you're cutting down wood like this, especially exotic woods, it's important to take a look before you make any cuts and have a look at the figuring on the wood. Of course, depending on how the figuring shapes and runs and the rays and in the wood, it's important that you cut in the right dimension that'll give you the look that you want. For me, I'm looking for as much figuring as possible because I want to appreciate that beautiful, beautiful pattern. So I'm going to cut, just mark here so I don't make a mistake, cut in this dimension because this side is what's going to really, I can peek through the wood there and see all the crazy lines and shapes. So that's the side I want to be facing out. You don't want to bury that or grind that away. You want to make sure you find that. So I'm just going to mark my wood here. I'm going to mill that down to size. And now we have nicely dimensioned pieces of material here, perfect little billets, ground to a nice flat finish so they can be properly drilled. Now we have excess material, so you also want to pay attention to how you're mounting the scales. You don't want your end cuts, your waste piece, to be your most beautifully figured piece of material, so pay close attention to that. Make sure everything works together properly here. Now we're getting really serious here. It's time to glue up the handle scales. Cannot say enough about buying and keeping nitrile gloves in the shop. I go through a lot. They aren't that expensive a pair. They do last a long time for a box of a couple hundred gloves. But if you're a craftsman, a hobbyist, someone who does a lot of crafts, artwork, anything, projects like that, even like mechanical work and stuff, man, it's so nice just being able to slip a pair on, especially if you're using something like glue. That really, if you do get it on your skin, it impairs you for the next 30 minutes because everything you touch, you're getting glue on. It's just a mess. It's hard to wash off. If you got gloves on like this, you pull them off and your hands are just as clean as before you started. So it's really nice to have that. I'm using a 2-part slow cure epoxy here. This is pretty much maximum strength. We will get exceptional results for this. And we don't need a whole lot because of course it's such a tiny little handle. Another little craft shop trick, popsicle sticks for stir sticks. You can buy them at the dollar store, super cheap for bundles of like 100. They might be like $1 or $2. And I also always buy little like I guess technically they're like shot glasses, they're shot cups. You can get them at the dollar store as well. I think I picked up these at Walmart. They were like maybe 25 for $1, 99 cents or something like that. And it's just handy for mixing up glues, or if you've got to drain a float bowl on a carburetor, or any little things like that when you don't know what to do with it. Those little cups come in handy, and like I said, they're really cheap to have around as well. Notice here I did kind of a unique pattern on the front end. That's something that was in my mind. I really wanted to try just to play into those nice sharp lines on the front end that we did with a compound grind. Try not to make too much mess here. Give it just a little wiggle, make sure all the epoxy mashes into all the pores. Your gloved hand, gloves in the garbage, clean enough to get in the vehicle and drive on without a worry. Okay, so that epoxy's been sitting for 24 hours. Time to get those clamps off. You do a little fingernail test, touch your epoxy. It should be almost like glass. There should be no give to it, no sponginess. You usually get a little bit of residue in your clamps. In this case, a real nice little stick there. Now I'll trim off the excess pin stock because the least grinding and the least dust introduced from grinding, and also the least amount of heat you can introduce to the piece. If I have to grind in that like probably ½ inch, 5/8 of an inch, if I have to grind that all off, it's going to send a lot of heat back through the pin, right through the wood, and this being a stabilized wood, you could introduce enough heat in that pin to actually burn the wood and you get a discoloring, so don't want to do that. Trim off as much as possible. And now for the hand sanding part. This part can get a little bit monotonous, but this is a really small handle, and stabilized wood is really good to work with. It's a lot, it's not as hard as micarta, not as resistant to abrasion. Going to sandpaper, knife makers need a lot of different grades of sandpaper, and it's good for just woodworkers and craftsmen in general. Now if you're a knife maker and polishing things, you will want a lot higher grits than like a woodworker would use. But for me, the must-have grits, I have lots of grits here, but the must-haves would be, gotta have 180. At minimum, you need 180 for starting. 220 is like my bread and butter. 220 and 400. 3M paper here are my bread and butter. You can finish with 400, and if you've done a really good job and give it a light oiled surface, you can be done with that finish. After the 400, maybe an 800, 6 or 8, and that will do pretty much any job. Now if you're getting into polishing, you're going to need up into at least the 2000 range, and then a good buffer after that. Ideally you'd hand sand even higher than that. Right now I've done a really good job at grinding this handle in on the belt sander there. So I'm going to start at 220 so I don't reintroduce too deep of grooves back into this handle. I've made it real good for myself. Sometimes it pays to really take your time, do a good job on the belt grinder to leave as much or as little hand sanding as possible. So I'm just going to start with the 220 here now. Actually, I'll need my gloves off because I need to be able to feel. You need to be able to feel little textures. There are things that your eye misses that your hands will pick up. The other essential is either music, an audiobook, or YouTube or something on the phone, because like I said, this job can get monotonous. So do you think you're ready to see our creation here? The first rascal ever. Straight off the buffer. Pulled that tape off, gave it a little wipe. Here it is. Check out this little miniature piece. No edge on yet. We're going to save that for the next episode because we don't have any leather work yet. Check out the satin grind. Notice those sharp lines, like I said, by leaving the forge finish, some contrast there with that swedge. But I don't want to put a finish edge on until we have something to protect it. Check out those barrel mosaic pins. Check out the figuring in that wood. We have some phenolic rod right through here. It actually feels so awesome in the hand, so comfortable. What an awesome neck pattern. Just feels just how I wanted, that super deep. It feels just how I wanted there with that super deep choil right here. It's just got so much hold because it comes so slim here. You couldn't possibly slip up over the blade. Everything's rounded nice and smooth. We have the belly back here, right where you'd want it, right for a bigger hand. It just, that's, the meat is right in that hollow of your hand there. Of course, it's not a very big knife. Beautiful, very excited. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate having you guys here. You'll want to come back next week as we work on part 2 of the project. That is the leather work, putting the final edge on this knife. And I know some people out there will actually find the leatherworking more exciting, because it might be applicable to even more projects than just knife making. Hope you found value in this episode. I try to include as much experience and information as I can, in hopes that you take something away more than just entertainment. As always, a big shout out to my sponsors. If any way possible, I'd love if you could go and support them. Make sure you tune in next week to Newfoundland Hobbyists.